Donald Trump sat down for his first television interview since his arraignment with Fox News' Tucker Carlson last night. The former president, of course, addressed the charges brought against him by Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg and maintained he's done absolutely nothing wrong and thus won't be dropping out of the 2024 race, even if he's convicted. Trump also went above and beyond to distinguish himself from other potential candidates in the GOP primary field, particularly as it comes to foreign policy.
Who's the biggest problem, sir? Is it China? Could it be Russia? Could it be North Korea? No, I said the biggest problem is from within. It's these sick, radical people from within, because we can handle, if we're smart, we can handle Russia, China. I did. Massive power, massive. And that's one of the things.
More than people understand?
More than people understand, yeah. Yeah, more.
Were you
surprised? They don't understand the power. If you look at Hiroshima, as some people call it, if you look at Nagasaki, you look at those two events took place many, many years ago, and multiply that power times 500. That's what you're talking about. Where it actually melted the granite. You know, granite is unmeltable by blowtorches.
Yes.
But the granite, if you look at granite areas, it's like water that got, hardened, like an ice skating rink. It melted the granite. If you look at that and multiply it times 500, that's what you're talking about.
However, one of the night's biggest bombshells came when Trump was asked about the Nord Stream pipeline explosions.
Who blew up the Nord Stream pipeline?
I don't want to get our country in trouble, so I won't answer it. But I can tell you who it wasn't, was Russia. How about when they blamed Russia? They said Russia blew up their own pipeline. You got a kick out of that one, too. It wasn't Russia.
Pretty diplomatic answer for a man who's supposed to be crazy.
So he was on for the full hour. I watched a good bit of it, and so that was obviously an interesting response on Nord Stream, raising a point we've raised here on the show many times, which is that Russia doesn't have a motivation to have done it, and so he didn't want to get the U.S. in trouble.
Yeah, that's the
not going to say who it is, but
I don't want to get the U.S. in trouble is a pretty explicit way of saying the U.S. did it.
Yeah. That did sound like that's what he was saying.
At least in his, not that he would have any particular insight into it as someone who's obviously no longer the president, but it is a very
I don't know.
interesting
He has all those documents at Mar-a-Lago. Maybe one of them is a calendar with like future plans, blow up Nord Stream. But when he was talking about the geopolitical way things are, saying that Russia, China, North Korea. I don't know that anyone's saying North Korea is a big threat, maybe John Bolton or something. But for the most part, China, Russia, this is the brilliance of Trump, that he is focused on what is going on inside our own country, which is the thing that resonates with most voters, whether you want to say that's inflation issues, price of things, whether you want to say that's the social safety net not being strong enough, the dysfunction of our crumbling infrastructure, all those things. Those are the issues people are concerned about, not And to the extent people are concerned about foreign adversaries like Russia and China, they don't want to spend unlimited sums of money on weaponry to fight those countries. And Trump gets that now. Now, he wanted to. The main thing animating him is his own persecution at the hands of government officials and such things, and you can disagree over whether that's appropriate or not given the things he's done. But we have explored the subject of the weaponization of the federal government, particularly against speech, against some fundamental rights, at least in the COVID context, and that I think is something on normal, average Americans' agendas. And he taps into that with sincerity.
Say what you want about Donald Trump, but he's savvy enough to know that overturning Roe was a bad idea with Dobbs. He's savvy enough to know that these domestic policy issues are front of mind. He's savvy enough to know that he should at least make gestures to say that he's going to defend the social safety net, Social Security, against efforts to cut them by both Republicans and Democrats alike. And there's a reason why he continues to lead in polls and be the more popular option among the base. And this kind of radical honesty that comes through in a statement like, I don't want to get the United States in trouble. when liberals balked at him as a liar in 2016 and framed him as this lying liar, and what they miss are those kinds of moments where he makes these admissions, he reveals truths even when he's not necessarily being super straightforward.
And that's what he did with Nord Stream. That was a great example of that.
That's what I'm saying. Like he's unable. It feels almost like he's constitutionally unable to keep what he knows or what he believes inside. And that's what I think a lot of voters see when they see him as an honest broker.
Well, right, because contrast what he said with Nord Stream with, what Biden surrogates would say, which is like, no, the U.S. has nothing to do with this, and
how dare
of course
you,
it was
sir.
Russia. How dare you impugn, the moral fiber of our great government?
We're the heroes.
And Trump, honestly, I'm not going to say who.
Yeah, America's done some bad things. We've killed some people. Like, that's Donald Trump, and that's why a lot of people love him.
A lot of killers, Bill.
A lot of killers, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Tucker Carlson gave his own thoughts on Trump's foreign policy chops after the interview. Let's watch some of that.
We spent more than an hour with Donald Trump today, and we were struck throughout the course of the conversation how his grasp of foreign policy, this man who was supposedly stupid, his understanding of world affairs is so much more nuanced and sophisticated and pro-American than the moronic neocons currently in charge. It was remarkable. Let's send all our ammo to Ukraine. Zelensky's like Churchill. Okay. For the past 7 years, the neocon media establishment's been telling you that Donald Trump is a dangerous lunatic. In 2 years in office, Joe Biden has brought the world to the brink of nuclear holocaust. Who's the dangerous lunatic?
Look, I think it's Katie Halper used to point this out a lot back when Trump was president, that liberals went with this weird contradictory narrative that Donald Trump was both, crazy and a threat and shouldn't have the nukes, but also that he was being weak on Russia and he needed to threaten them more with nukes and bombs. And they couldn't quite decide what they wanted. Was he Putin's puppet, or was he not
or
firing
does he have his finger on the button and he might,
do you want him to have it, or do you not want him to have it on the button? And I think there's it's only natural for people who are supportive of him to want to foreground the inconsistency of that kind of worldview, and also the ways in which he's been right on a lot of stuff now over time.
Right. And if you want to criticize Donald Trump, even on foreign policy, go ahead. But say that, was he committed to this non-interventionist foreign policy when he did things like, pick John Bolton to make foreign policy, do the assassination of the Iranian general, all the things he did that clashed with his stated preference for not getting involved, for thinking Iraq was a mistake, and for not wanting to escalate toward World War III with Russia. He talked a good game on all those things, and I think the reality failed to live up to that expectation. But that's not really the criticism. That's certainly not the criticism you hear from mainstream liberals and Democrats.
They can't say that because they would need to be able to point to a candidate or a principal who behaved differently, who behaved in the alternative. And since there isn't one, Donald Trump just having a big talking game is the best that there is basically on offer right now. Your options are Donald Trump who talks a big game and doesn't follow through, or a Democrat who does neither. I wanted to ask you just at the end here what you made of the union of Tucker Carlson and Donald Trump following what we learned about Tucker Carlson's feelings about Donald Trump from the Dominion lawsuit. Some folks, Mehdi Hassan, aggregated some of the statements that Tucker Carlson has made about Donald Trump off the record. He called him a demonic force, a destroyer. He said Trump could easily destroy us if we play it wrong. He said, we're very, very close to being able to ignore Trump most nights. I truly can't wait. He said, I hate him passionately. And of course, now we're seeing a very different dynamic play out during this interview. What do you make of it?
Well, look, honestly, I sympathize with that kind of dichotomy that Tucker must be wrestling with, which is that on foreign policy, which matters a lot to Tucker, in which Tucker has been one of the kind of foremost conservative thinkers and pundits trying to chart the course, the direction of the Republican Party, the conservative movement, away from neoconservatism. He on Fox, he's the most outspoken on that, and actually would criticize Trump when he thought Trump was veering from the non-interventionist kind of intellectual tradition Tucker has become a part of. I don't think he was always necessarily there, but he very much is associated with now. so wanting to positively platform Trump on those issues, but at the same time being just tremendously frustrated. I think you can be the most partisan Republican, like diehard conservative, even a total supporter of Trump's policies, and acknowledge that Trump's behavior immediately after the election was just bad on itself, and also really bad for the cause of the Republicans and the conservatives, because it was embarrassing. And no amount of underplaying it or you're trying to minimize it gets around the fact that Trump did himself and the cause and the Republican Party massive damage.
But that's a little bit.
So I think
the question I'm asking. I'm talking about something more interpersonal. Mm-hmm. This is a man who's sitting across from another man who he knows says he hates him passionately, acting with a level of cordiality that seems a little artificial, knowing how people really feel. I felt this way. We interviewed a popular YouTube host, Vosh, here on the show, who was very kind on this show, and it prompted me to follow up with him afterward and invite him on my show to have a lot longer conversation, because I knew of some very
I saw the clip of
ugly things that he has said about me in the past. I think it's a little two-faced to sit there.
People
and have
asked,
that kind of
by the way, I
reaction.
saw people say, I had no idea you two had that feud. I wouldn't have forced you to do an interview with someone who didn't. You were fine with it. I know.
I don't mind at all, but I do think that people should own, their beliefs, and you can work through them. But so the question here is, do you think? I mean, Trump being Trump and the media consumer that he is, of course, has to have known the things that Tucker said about him. And what do you think happened behind the scenes? What kind of negotiations happened to get them back in the place where he's giving this prime time, much desired interview?
I mean, I don't political figures have to have a certain amount of. I mean, Trump seems notoriously thin-skinned,
right?
But they all have to have a certain amount of. They all go at each other, right? All 16 people who ran for the Republican nomination, and a lot of Trump and Marco Rubio laid into each other, and Marco Rubio, I think, is seen as a kind of key out, and Ted Cruz, most of all. The things he said about Ted Cruz's entire family, and Ted Cruz will defend him, and Trump is on good terms with him now. There's a certain amount of, you just have to, I think, in politics and media, have to let bygones be bygones and not, I think Trump is good at recognizing, Trump is at least good at recognizing who is good for him in the moment, and he would probably recognize that, he wants to get the nomination again. And
that feels right.
Performing admirably on Tucker's show and making the foreign policy points he wants to make, I think he understands that that's good for him.
That feels right. It also did.
But I don't know what it would be like behind the scenes.
But I did notice what seemed a little bit like a jab, at least at one point during the interview, where he accused Tucker Carlson of making some kind of faux pas during his North Korea visit that Donald Trump had to paper over. Seemed like it wasn't necessary to inject that into the conversation, but maybe Trump's still feeling a little bit salty there.
I will. Tucker, who I know a little bit personally, is a very affable guy, very, very easy to get along with. He's good at setting people at ease, so that's a skill.
Apparently not Kim Jong-un. All right, we'll be back with My Radar coming up next. Stick around.